none of us really is as much of a Brexiteer as my next guest. And he's someone who wants to have a proper celebration on the 31st of January, when we do actually finally at 11 p.m. that day leave the European Union. And that is the Brexit Party leader, Nigel Farage. Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning.
Good morning. Very, very happy New Year to you. This is a very different start to the year than last year, where we faced all those battles, legal battles and commons battles about whether or not Brexit was going to happen. Now the battle ahead is just about the sort of deal we get in terms of free trade and the likes and our relationship with Europe. But in terms of whether or not we are going to become a free and independent sovereign state, taking back control of our actual laws and our money, etc., that is going to happen on the 31st of January. And you have been so instrumental in this. You want to have something of a celebration on the night to mark it, don't you?
Well, I do. And I remember so vividly New Year's Day 2019, thinking to myself, this is a disaster. There's a second referendum coming down the tracks. Parliament was moving ever more closely towards it. And I really thought this time last year that Brexit may not happen. So I think 2019 was the year when people actually spoke. We are going to leave. It's 99.9% certain that we are going to leave on the 31st.
There's still some doubt in your mind.
Well, I mean, there's 0.1% doubt, because what no one's talking about is the fact that the European Parliament has to approve. So that the final vote on this will not be in the Commons, it'll be in the European Parliament under the EU treaties. And look, I think they will approve it, but Mr. Verhofstadt before Christmas made one or two threatening noises. I've still got grave reservations about the document itself, but since then, during the election campaign and in the Conservative manifesto, Boris Johnson has said two things very, very clearly. Number one, there would be no further extension to the transition period, and we absolutely will be out everything by the end of this year. And number two, even more crucially, he said we're not going to accept regulatory alignment, meaning that we won't have to accept European rules on everything from financial services to fisheries. Now, provided Boris Johnson holds true to his word, we will, during the course of this year, genuinely be a free, independent country. And yep, I think that is worth celebrating. And let's be honest, 11 p.m. on the 31st of this month, as Big Ben strikes 11, we will, after 45 years, have left the European club. So, yeah, I'm planning a cross-party celebration. I've applied to the Mayor of London under an organisation called Leave Means Leave. And what we want to do, Julia, is put up some staging. We'll have a few speeches, we'll have some singing, we'll have some music. It'll be a genuine celebration.
Well, this is it, of course. I attended that Leave Means Leave rally and spoke at that back on the 29th of March last year. And again, a cross-party affair it was. People very much from the left all the way to the right. And it was a really, I have to say, very feel-good event, despite the fact there was a lot of anger at the fact that we weren't then leaving on that first date that we thought we were going to leave on. But you want to have sort of up to 10,000 Leave supporters, so they won't have to be Brexit Party supporters. It'll be across the board. Anyone who's been supporting Brexit, welcome.
Look, Leave Means Leave is a non-party organisation that has lobbied ever since 2016 for the referendum to happen. And yes, you spoke on that stage with us on March 29th, as did Paul Embry, a trade unionist, as did Kate Hoey, who was then a Labour MP. So this is not about left or right. This is to celebrate. And I tell you what it really celebrates. It celebrates a victory for the little people, for ordinary people, because the entire establishment just a few years ago did not even want to discuss Brexit. I remember a time when there wasn't a single MP in the House of Commons who backed Brexit. Every big business, every trade union, all the press, everybody supported staying in the EU. And this victory has really come because thousands of ordinary folk up and down this country have campaigned for years. And it is a remarkable thing. It just shows you, that if you live in a democracy, anything is possible.
Well, do you think that victory is, and I know, you've said you have reservations about this, the deal that Boris Johnson has done, and everyone's been very aware of that. But is this victory even sweeter for the fact that it was a 3.5-year battle? Because I don't think any of us actually thought on the 24th of June 2016, when we woke up to the Leave victory, that we would be battling, 3.5 years on to get that to happen. And we would have to go through all of those different votes, the European elections and 2 general elections, and all of these other votes to get, and all those battles in the House of Commons and in the courts to get there. Is the victory sweeter for that battle?
In one way, yes. I think that if I hadn't launched the Brexit Party, if I hadn't founded the Brexit Party back in February, reset the agenda, then Mrs May would still be in number 10 and would be heading towards a second referendum. So on a personal level, I'm very pleased about it. But there's another level at which actually what's happened is dreadful, because so many former prime ministers and very senior figures in our country have for 3.5 years refused to accept the principle of loser's consent. Namely, if you lose an election, you may not like it, but you accept it. And I think they've done untold damage to this country in the last 3.5 years. Firstly, in terms of the economy and the way in which we could have been moving on. And secondly, in terms of our global standing. So a lot of damage has been done. But hey, do you know what? On the 31st of this month, let's celebrate. It's going to be a huge, great, historic moment, the biggest, certainly, political event in your life and my lifetimes. And thereafter, do everything we can to encourage the Prime Minister to be tough.
Well, indeed. Now, we have to ask all whether, how much we do move on. We've got Labour leadership candidates who are already talking about, like Jess Phillips, possibly campaigning to rejoin the EU. We've got Sir Keir Starmer, the Shadow Brexit Secretary, who's one of the leading candidates, possibly the front runner, talking about how the Labour Party should have had a clearer position on Brexit. We know he doesn't mean pro-Brexit, he means remain. Does the country move on? Do we on the 1st of February, do we stop being Remainers and Leavers and we move on?
Do you know, I was with Alistair Campbell yesterday. I mean, nobody has been a more vociferous voice for Remain. I mean, he's been the guy behind the people's vote. He's been handling all the press, and he's a very effective political and press operator. And even Alistair Campbell says, "Look, I accept the fact we're leaving. The battle now is about the terms upon which we leave." So there is not going to be a second referendum. That is finished. That is over. And I think that if the next Labour leader hints that at some point we might rejoin the European Union, they will find a shrinking minority of this population that support that view, and the vast majority of us saying, for goodness sake, the war is over, let's just get on with the rest of our lives.
We'll be bringing them out of the jungle for the next 30 years, won't we? Having to break the news to them. Can I ask you, you talked about rebranding the Brexit Party to the Reform Party. Are you going to go ahead with those plans to keep Boris Johnson on the Brexit straight and narrow? Well,
I mean, one thing that we've learned in the last 3.5 years is that we have a parliament that is not necessarily representative of the opinion in this country. We have an electoral system that is clearly hugely out of date. We have postal voting massively open to fraud and intimidation. We have a system of patronage and peerages whereby friends get rewarded, enemies get bought off and get chucked in the House of Lords, that frankly I think has no place in 21st century Britain. So I do think that the time and the mood for genuine political change and reform, I think it's there, I think it's real. What I've got to decide, I suppose, is, I mean, remember, it was in 1993 that I put myself forward to stand for UKIP in the Eastleigh by-election. I mean, I've been doing this for 27 years, and I've, and you know me well enough to know I've been absolutely dedicated to it 24/7 for that whole period of time. So I do think a campaign for political reform is vital. I think the Brexit Party should morph at some point this year into a reform party. I guess what I've got to decide is, do I want to spend the next 10 or 15 years of my life, once again, trying to climb Everest without crampons?
Just finally, you did mention the House of Lords there. Can we just lay this to rest once and for all? Have you or have you not been offered a knighthood and or a peerage? And if you were, would you turn them down?
Back in 2016, after the referendum, there was some very friendly talk about the fact that I really ought to be going to the House of Lords, and would I be, up for it? And I said no, absolutely not. And I realised that if I had accepted that, I would have been out of the game. I wouldn't have been able to launch the Brexit Party, given that they messed it up the way they did. And I always said, I'm not for sale. I'm not for sale. So, no, that isn't what I want to do.
There will never be Sir Nigel Farage or Lord Farage. Never going to happen. Categorically, yes or no?
Anyone that ever says never is very, very, very stupid, Julia. But I have no interest in doing that.
Okay.
I think the House of Lords needs to go. I think we need in the 21st century, let's have an elected upper chamber. That would be a lot more democratic.